Welcome to the series of video tutorials on how to carry out effective research. Welcome to the series of lectures on marketing research. My name is Dr. Dean, and in today's lecture we'll be looking at some of the key concepts of sampling. Specifically today, I hope to cover what do we mean by sampling, how do we determine the size of a sample, and we'll also review various sampling techniques. Let's start off with first, what do we mean by sampling? A sample is a snapshot that is representative of the whole population, and the best analogy that I can give you is if we had a cake, how much of that cake would we need to eat to actually appreciate its flavour? Well, all we would need is one portion to gain an impression of what the rest of the cake actually tasted. So therefore, sampling has many benefits in that you don't need to survey everybody to understand their views. And in terms of approaches, there are two approaches which we will see on the next slide. The two approaches to undertaking sampling are number one, census, and number two, sampling. In a census, the UK government carries out a census of the adult population every 10 years to determine the size of the population, the professions, the family progressions, and various other characteristics. Now, a census is extremely expensive because it involves actually interviewing every single adult in the UK, which can take up to a year and can involve over 100,000 field operatives. And this is not something that would be available to many organisations, these resources. Therefore, what most organisations tend to do is to adopt sampling. And what we tend to do is use a criteria to select individuals that are representative of the wider population. And in terms of numbers, we will see in the next slide how we determine the size of a sample. In terms of the size of a sample, quite often we're limited by time, location, and money. And in terms of statistics, if we were doing a survey, the minimum number that you would require would be 30, and this has something to do with the central limit theorem, which looks at normal distribution of the mean, which we will discuss in more detail in future slides. For statistical analysis, then any response close to 300 would permit you to gain a very detailed insight as to the population views and opinions. And if we wanted greater accuracy, then we would probably go towards 1,000 or 3,000 responses. And this is the usual sample size that is undertaken when determining people's voting intentions in elections. So to determine the size of a sample, we will look at in the next slide that what we tend to do is we identify our population, i.e. what are all the people who could actually take part in our survey. We then develop a sampling criteria which could be based on age, gender, location, socioeconomic group, profession, and so on, so that we could then identify specific target groups and then identify a specific number of that sampling frame that we would then survey to gauge what the population was thinking. And in terms of sampling, as we will see in the next slide, there are 8 major types to sampling. In terms of sampling design, it can be differentiated into two camps: non-probability and probability. Non-probability is based on non-statistical techniques. So convenience could be specific time. Judgment could be your opinion of the type of people you'd want to include in the sample. Quota could be you need a specific number of females or males of a specific age to participate in the sample. Snowball is where you would ask one respondent a view on a particular product, for example the new iPhone, and you would then ask them, do you know anybody else who's purchased a new iPhone? And after you'd kind of interviewed those people, you would then ask them, do they know and could they recommend anybody else? And so the snowball would continue. These are the various types of non-probability sampling. At the other extreme, we have probability sampling. These are based on statistical measurements. And the most powerful within the probability group is simple random sampling. In simple random sampling, every respondent has an equal chance of being selected. Whereas in stratified sampling, what you do is you develop a criteria. It could be based on age, it could be based on gender, and you would stratify the sample. Systematic sampling is where you would generate one random number and then go up in increments of 5 and 10 to then select the next respondent. Cluster sampling is when you would focus on sampling within a specific region or an area to identify what people in that area, what their views were. Thank you for listening to this webcast on sampling. I hope the information was beneficial. Bye.